Well, welcome to the Oregon Department of Human Services SNAP Partners meeting. This virtual meeting occurs monthly. It is a forum for updates, discussion, and feedback, and question and answer time about food programming and other related subject matter. We do offer ASL and CART transcription services, and this meeting is recorded so that we can share the meeting along with the presentations and minutes to those partners who are unable to join us today. The follow-up email with all corresponding documents and links will be sent in about 1 week. At this time, we do ask that you introduce yourself in chat. Please include your name, pronouns, position, and organization that you work for. I'm going to go ahead and add mine in there for you. It's really helpful for connection purposes for us and for other partners as well. Today's agenda includes presentations from the Office of Resiliency and Emergency Management, as well as information about SNAP replacement benefits, and there will also be an opportunity for discussion. We'd also like to give a short update about the Farm Bill. Presenters, we do ask that you turn on your cameras while you're presenting where able, as our partners appreciate seeing the person who's speaking. Of course, we would also like to invite all those that are willing, able, and comfortable to share your cameras as well. We would love to be in community with you, and seeing that makes that so much easier in this virtual space. So I'm pretty sure I saw our first presenters here. We have Michelle and Tara from the Office of Resiliency and Emergency Management. Are you ready to go, Michelle and Tara?
I am ready, but it has been a minute since I had to try to present on this platform. So if you can tell me how I can share my screen, that would be beneficial.
Sure. Well, first I will ask Sam to go ahead and stop sharing. There we go, that. And then in the center, towards the bottom, there should be a green
Got it.
icon that says share screen. And if you are sharing anything that has audio, make sure you share your audio as well.
We don't have any audio, so that is one less thing for me to worry about. I'm going to see if I've got the right screen for you to see, because with 3 screens, it's always questionable. There we go.
We see it. You're good.
Yay! First hurdle accomplished. So we are here with the Office of Resilience and Emergency Management. Misha asked us to give you a little bit of an overview about what our agency does. And if I could ask my co-presenter to introduce herself first.
Hi, my name is Tara Ralph, and I'm a Social Services Emergency Liaison. And my regions are Lane and Douglas, and now Coos County.
Thank you, Tara. And my name is Michelle Richards. I'm the Mass Care Coordinator. So I get requests from folks like Tara when there is an instance happening in one of their communities, and I work with our vending partners to try to meet that need, whatever that might be. So let's get into this so you can learn a little bit about us.
Okay, so we'll just share a little bit about who we are and how we came about. We are, as Michelle said, within the Oregon Department of Human Services, and both of us actually came from self-sufficiency program before we started doing this position. So I've been with DHS for, I just had my 23rd anniversary. So I was with self-sufficiency most recently as a community partnership coordinator. That's how Misha and I knew each other before this. And then, Michelle, how long have you been with DHS?
For almost 15 years now.
All right. So how OREM came about, as I like to say, is that we were born from the 2020 wildfires. So what we started doing immediately after the fires, as some of you might remember, is a lot of the communities that were impacted had set up some resource centers. And they were called multi-agency resource centers, MARCs. And I started working at the table for helping with SNAP benefit replacement for people who lost food they purchased with SNAP benefits in the wildfires. And then we continued to support from an SSP, from an ODHS perspective in that way. And then what happened was during the 2020 fires was also COVID. So normally in a disaster sheltering happens in what's called a non-congregate setting, and Michelle's going to talk about that in a little while, which is basically like a gymnasium floor or something. But because of COVID, they couldn't do that. So they had people sheltered in hotels. And Red Cross is only temporary sheltering and feeding. And then normally in other disasters, people can go home. Well, this time the wildfires were so devastating, there were no homes for these people, a lot of these people to go home to. So ODHS said, well, we can't have people just be homeless. So ODHS took over the sheltering and the feeding and the social service piece from the Red Cross January 1st of 2021. So that's kind of how we were created. And since then, now we are much bigger and we do a lot of other things that we'll talk about, but that's kind of how our beginning came.
So now that you know how we came into being, some of the things that we do are mass care related. So we have been tasked, or ODHS, I should say, has been tasked with supporting Oregonians during emergencies and recovery. We call that an emergency support function, and our emergency support function is mass care. So that looks like taking care of sheltering people and making sure that they have food and water, access to disaster social services, and reunification. It's important for us to state that this is a locally led response. So all of our disasters started at a local level, right? So that local government and those local agencies are the ones that are going to start that response. And our role is to support them in being able to access the resources that they need in order to be able to get the individuals in their communities who have been impacted by disaster to their recovery goal, whatever that might look like. So beyond the sheltering, beyond the feeding, one of those really critical pieces that we assist with is disaster case management. And that's that individual who can literally walk with the family along their path to recovery, whatever that end goal is for the family that they've determined.
And then briefly, some other examples of some things that we do are community assistance. So that would be things such as warming and cooling centers that during extreme hazard, and also cleaner air centers during hazardous weather and hazardous air quality. And then we also assisted around emergent issues. So for instance, we were tasked with assisting with the Afghan refugees, and we worked with some temporary sheltering for them. And then, I already mentioned the severe weather response. And then also natural disaster response. We help with like most recently, the 2024 winter storms. We did a lot of response around that. And then Tillamook County had some flooding in December of 23. We assisted with that. And then in the Klamath County, there's been some droughts and falling water tables that's been ongoing since 2021. So we're helping community members whose wells have run dry. And there's a whole bunch of other efforts that we're doing. So basically, my position as a social service emergency liaison is also replicated region-wide, and everybody in each area of the state kind of has different things that they're working on depending on what their community's needs are. So in Lane and Douglas, I do a lot of work around wildfires and hazardous weather. And then in Coos, we'll do a lot of preparedness around tsunami and the Cascadia subduction zone. So each region has a little bit different of a focus. And then also, I think that we'll be talking about water and things a little bit later, because that was the point of this, was around lifelines and how that impacts you guys. So we'll talk a little bit more in depth about that in a couple slides. Oh, actually, in the next slide. Michelle, you want to take it away?
Sure will. So basically at the beginning, when we're tasked with assisting a region, it's about meeting those foundational needs, right? So those foundational needs look like access to safe drinking water, being able to have the foods that you need in order to take care of your family and yourself. And these are a number of different ways that we might do that. And we'll go into these in a little bit more in depth in just a minute here. So let's start into it. So more and more we are seeing our response to families who have lost the ability to secure safe drinking water. And there's a number of different reasons that impact that. I don't know about you, but I really count on my kitchen sink giving me safe drinking water. I really count on being able to go in and take a shower when I want to and not have to worry about that water coming out. It might surprise you to know that some of our communities around Oregon have such old infrastructure that water mains are still wooden. Now, I was super surprised when I found that out myself, but we're seeing those types of infrastructures that haven't been invested in fail. And Tara's going to talk with you about one of the communities that we have here in just a moment. We also see an increase in contaminated groundwater. You can't boil out contaminants that we're talking about in these instances. What you do is you end up condensing them. So it's not safe for individuals to boil the water and then use it to drink or to cook. And as Tara mentioned, we've got a lot of drought that's happening. And what that does is it dries up the wells that our families are using in order to meet their household needs for water. So in order for us to assist all of these families, we have to have partners with local and national water vendors to be able to assist in meeting that need, whatever it might look like. It could look like an individual bottle of water and several of those for the family, or little packets or juice box like containers of water. It can look a little bit bigger, our 1, 2, and 5 gallon water dispensers, or in our households where we've got a dry well. Then we're looking at bulk delivery of water to a large container outside the house that's then filtered so that they can meet all of their household needs, including access to safe drinking water from that one spot. Tara, do you want to explain what one of those efforts looks like?
Yeah, sure. So I'll share one that was my experience in Lane County. The picture that's towards the middle that says food share, that's the Mapleton food share. And Mapleton is a small town in between Eugene, close to Florence. And they have a really old failing infrastructure. In fact, their main water infrastructure already failed, and now their backup infrastructure is failing. And they are applying for all the federal and state grants that they possibly can. But the interesting thing is that they're unincorporated. So the only governing body that they have happens to be the water district. And so they're just volunteers that are serving on a water board. And they don't necessarily have grant writers and that time and expertise to do that. So they're struggling with that. And we're able to connect them for technical assistance to get that resolved. So what happened was they reached out to Lane County, because we always start local. And then Lane County assisted with the pieces of the water emergency that they could. And then what they needed help with was accessing bottles of water. So you can see in the picture, there's pallets of bottles of water for those people who needed safe drinking water that were impacted. So we could narrow it down to the hundreds of people that were impacted and let them know that they can pick up water for themselves. And then also there's a lot of elderly or people without transportation. So we encourage them to check on their neighbor and help locally deliver to those that couldn't otherwise get the water. So we were able to have actually you can see the truck in the far left is delivering the pallets of water. And so while we're working on a long-term solution with them, we're also helping with the immediate need, but at the direction of the local emergency manager. So we don't just show up, we make sure that all local resources have been accessed first, and then we help fill that gap at the request of the emergency manager of the city or the county. I think that's the other pictures are other ones. Those ones aren't mine. I don't know, Michelle, are those local?
So one of them is actually one of our vendors. The little one down in the bottom corner is one of our vendors that provides water in different ways. aside from individual water bottles, they have the little juice box type of water dispensers, and then they have little packets, which I've gotten a 72-hour kit. Super easy to tuck into a backpack so that you've got water with you when you need it. Okay, so going into our meal delivery. Typically, when an event starts, we haven't prepared for this. We don't get a little hold the date for a disaster. It kind of springs up on us, and then we need to respond. So in those first hours after a disaster happens, if we've got an immediate need for food, one of the things that we count on would be MREs, meals ready to eat, or heater meals. And having those stored around the state really assists us in being able to meet that need in a quick fashion. One of the other ways that we might assist, especially with families who have a severed lifeline for food, but have the ability to stay in their home and cook, would be to support that food by getting food boxes to them. Now, typically these are shelf stable. If we get enough lead time, we can put some fresh bread, fresh produce in, but these boxes take care of a single individual, gives them 3 meals a day for 7 days. So our boxes are age appropriate. You're not going to have the same things in a box for a toddler that you do for an adult. If we have a family of 4 that requests food boxes, they would get 4 boxes, and we would look at the ages of everyone in the household to make sure that we were feeding those individuals appropriately.
And then the other thing that we can assist with through contractors is prepared meals. So after we've had a little bit of planning time, Michelle will reach out to the vendors that we have and request some prepared meals and partnerships with local restaurants and catering companies. So a few examples that I have personal experience with is, for instance, with the 2020 wildfires, when we were sheltering people in hotels, the hotel rooms didn't have full kitchens. So we were delivering 3 meals a day during their sheltering while they recover from the wildfire. And then another example was most recently during the winter storms, I was assisting in Malheur County, helping them open up their first warming center right before a big winter storm over in Eastern Oregon. And so they needed help with the meal piece of it. And so Michelle was able to contract with a local restaurant that actually was really delicious and so welcomed by the people that were experiencing homelessness that needed a warming center. So that was an experience with that. And then right when I came back from Malheur County, as soon as the Eugene airport opened back up from the ice storm, then I jumped right into the recovery for the ice storms that we had here in Eugene, Cottage Grove, Springfield area. And one of the examples from there is that the community of Mohawk, which is a tiny, outside of Springfield, a tiny community, their fire department and their school noticed there were a lot of people for an extended period of time with no power. And some people were starting to make unsafe choices of using like a generator for propane inside for cooking and and heating. And so they were worried. So they wanted to open up the school for a safe place for people to come and just get warmth and electricity. And then it turned into they needed a place to stay the night. And so they had 1 cot in their fire station. And so they reached out to us and we coordinated with the local emergency manager, and we helped with not only getting them cots and some staffing for the shelter, but then also the feeding. So, and some people honestly didn't need to spend the night, but they did need a safe place to get some warm meals because they had no way of cooking at home. So they came in just for the meals and the warm coffee and the charging of their phone, and then they were able to go back home and then come back for the next meal. So each person's individual needs just depends on the situation. But those were a few examples that I had around prepared meals being delivered.
So beyond our feeding and getting water to folks, one of the things that we do is sheltering. And Tara talked a little bit about the different types of sheltering that we've got. We've got congregate sheltering, which is probably what you all picture in your head when you hear disaster shelter, right? It's that large open space, lots of cots put in there, very little privacy. That's a typical shelter. And we do that for a number of reasons, but most importantly, because resources are limited. And this is a way for us to expand those resources across a large group of people. One of the other things that we use this for, or why we use this rather than non-congregate, is because when we've got staff monitoring individuals who are in shelter, it is our responsibility to keep those folks safe and secure, right? Our shelters are temporary, safe, and secure. This location, we have line of sight, so we can see a large group of people with a small number of staff and be able to take care of the needs of those individuals in one location rather than going around to different locations. But when we think about what that large shelter looks like, it's probably not going to be beneficial and might be super difficult for some individuals or dangerous for folks to use. So families that I'm talking about for those two things, we would look at non-congregate sheltering or putting them into a hotel room, similar to what we did when COVID was our reality and we were sheltering because of the wildfires. We use this for families that have a need beyond the norm. So think of families that might have children with special needs, a child with autism. That child in a congregate shelter setting, receiving all of that sensory information all day long would be super difficult for the kiddo to deal with and really stressful for parents to try to take care of that kiddo. We also have individuals who are medically fragile. And shelter spaces, we're sharing all of that same air. So if one person has a cold, pretty soon two people are going to have a cold, and we just keep compounding that. During our Smith complex fire response last year, we had a family that was looking at having to evacuate from their home. A medically fragile individual in that family made it impossible for them to go to a shelter. So we were looking at non-congregate sheltering or a hotel room for them and their caregiver so that that person could be taken care of and wouldn't be exposed to anything that would make them fear for their health and safety.
Okay, and then next, I think we're getting a little tight on time, Michelle, just so you know. We have 20 minutes, right, Misha? We're already 1 minute over. We just have a few more slides.
Yes, it's okay.
Okay.
We have some flexibility in our schedule today.
Okay,
so
good.
No worries.
Okay, we could go on and on. We love our jobs. So, okay. So another example of where we assist with the feeding and the water lifelines is around community resource centers. So this picture actually on the right-hand side is underneath the City Hall in Springfield during the winter ice storm. And your very own Miora was upstairs helping people replace their SNAP benefits that they lost when they lost power. From the ice storm. So thank you so much for just jumping into your own community and helping out. You don't even know how much of a relief that was. But the other thing, Michelle was able to coordinate getting some of those food boxes that she mentioned earlier, the emergency food boxes. And community resource centers are usually stood up in a disaster where people might not necessarily need sheltering, but they might need information. They might need other resources like insurance information if they had a burst pipe, or they needed help with getting services through their coordinated care organization or other things. So it's a resource center for people to come and get information and resources. And in this case, we were able to help with bundles of firewood. So people who needed a safe way to stay warm if they had a fireplace or a wood stove. And so we also then were able to help with food and water at this location as well. And I see there was a question in the chat. So thank you for that question. These services you provide are during a disaster and just to those affected in the affected area, correct? Yes, that is correct. So it could be an emergency, not necessarily like a large scale disaster like the 2020 wildfires. It could be a local emergency like the ice storm, and it doesn't have to be like a city or a state declared or a federal declared emergency. It's when the local emergency manager or tribal emergency manager has a need for the safety of their community members, and they need our help. So, so yes, it's only to those people who were impacted by that. Okay, there we go. And then this is our mass care response team. So Michelle and I, we are a very small team. So when we have large scale emergencies or disasters, we oftentimes need the assistance of others. And so what you see here is a mass care response team, which are ODHS employees who have stepped up to say, I would like to assist in a disaster. They receive some training around sheltering, and they get their food handler's permit. We help them with that. And then they do a shelter drill. So they learn how to, and we model our shelter drill after American Red Cross because they're the experts. So that when we need help in an emergency, then we have trained DHS employees who can step in and assist us. And they are then paid as if they were working, but instead of processing SNAP benefits, they are assisting with feeding in a shelter. Or if it's on the evenings or weekends, then they do get overtime, and it comes from our budget, not the child welfare budget or the SSP budget or the voc rehab or whatever. So these are very much needed because we're so small. So an example would be the Mohawk. When we had the ice storm, our own Eugene, Springfield, Cottage Grove employees were deeply impacted by the disaster, and they could not help at any of the shelters. So what we had to do was reach out to our neighboring mass care response team members in Roseburg, because Roseburg is not too far away, and I-5 by that time was safe enough to drive. So people from the Douglas County drove and helped. And then we did have a few Lane County mass care response team members that were able to safely get to the shelter and work some shifts. So that's an example. And if you're a DHS employee on this call and you're interested, we are always recruiting. So at the very last slide, you'll have Michelle and my email addresses, and please reach out to us and we'll spend more time explaining what that looks like if you are interested. Or if you know a DHS employee who would be really good in assisting in disasters or emergencies, please share this information with them and have them reach out to us.
Okay, as Tara said before, these are locally led efforts, state supported. We just don't have the ability with our little tiny staff that we've got to do all of these things, nor do we have the ability to provide a lot of these services. So we really depend on our local partners in order to be able to provide food and shelter and water. One of the other things that it does when we partner with local businesses to provide those things, it keeps funding coming into that area. And funding, a lot of times when we're talking about a disaster, is impacted. We don't have the dollars flowing in from tourism. So being able to partner with those agencies really assists us in making sure that the money's staying local and we're supporting all Oregonians who've been impacted by that disaster. It also allows us to So this is how we're doing it. Our applications or our bids are out there in Oregon Buys for our hotels and motels and restaurants to be able to find those applications and complete them. I am able to walk folks through getting registered in Oregon Buys and getting them through the paperwork. It's really critical that we think about these things in days like today, days when we don't have any disasters happening, blue sky days, because well, you have our information here. We will make certain that you've got that going forward. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Like Tara said, we love our jobs. We're always happy to talk about it. and to talk with you about what it would mean to be an MCRT member or to have a local business be a partner with us. Thank you guys so much.
All right, thanks so much, Tara and Michelle. Does anybody have questions for these two? I know they did a great job of explaining things pretty thoroughly, but I know I learned a few things, and I've been working with Orem for a while now, so it's always fun to learn new things about programs. All right. Well, a few months ago, I think it was March, because it was during spring break, we had scheduled time to follow up on a request around SNAP placement benefits. And the request essentially was, hey, can we talk about this before the disaster hits, right? Instead of trying to figure it out in the middle of things. And so we did try to have a conversation in March, but there were a lot of folks missing, probably because of spring break, and we weren't able to really have that discussion to see how things went for you as far as replacement benefits, how the rollout went during the winter storms. So we definitely want to give time for that today, but we also want to review what replacement benefits are, right? And what you need to do to access those or help others access them. And so I'm going to hand it over to Mayor right now, who's going to walk you through those pieces and open it up for discussion. Mayora.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I'm using a new mic, so hopefully it'll work. I'm going to share my screen. I don't know if I cannot. I have to take turns. Okay, here we go. All right, can you see the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm just going to go through SNAP replacements, do some basics so that everyone kind of knows how the process works in general. I will share some additional information as we get to certain parts, including where a waiver can change different components, as we saw this most recent winter. Fire season is coming up. Fire season means that people are evacuated, they're displaced, and often food is destroyed or abandoned and then spoils. So we want to make sure that we connect with the multiple different community partners that will support individuals. And also one thing that I learned a lot about in January is that, especially in the Portland area, we have a lot of community partners who actually go out into neighborhoods where individuals might need assistance that is brought to them. So we were wanting to make sure that we kind of chat about the many different resources that we have, the different ways that people can apply for replacement benefits, and then also share some of the developments that we're seeking right now to make this process a bit easier. In general, replacements are allowed when food that is bought with SNAP is destroyed. So it's when someone purchases something, and it could be something like, I purchased a bunch of stuff, I filled my pantry, and I had a rat infestation, and my food is destroyed that I purchased with SNAP. And so we are needing to get a report, so that can come in through an email, that can be a phone call, that the individual lost their SNAP benefits. And then within 10 days of that report date, so there's two 10-day periods, we need to get a signed statement or affidavit. I will tell you that those are components and deadlines set by the federal government. So that's why they are set at those arbitrary days. Oregon didn't choose those. Those are things that were chosen by and regulated by the federal government. And I can't see the chat while I'm sharing. So Misha, if you will interrupt me if anyone has questions, and if you would like to unmute yourself and ask a live question while I'm going, please feel free to do so.
You're good so far.
Okay. This slide shows multiple different ways that people can request benefit replacements. There's the 1-800 number. All of this information is on our ODHS website as well. And we have just received confirmation and inquired that the local storefront offices will make sure that the SNAP replacement forms are in the lobby. Some people want to pick one up so that they have one at home. That's one thing that community partners asked this winter, and we heard you. And so we have made sure that all the storefront offices know that having those forms in the lobby for people to grab, keep one at home if they want, or come in and grab during their lunch and turn it in at their earliest convenience. That is something that we have heard you loud and clear and are going to accommodate. Another thing that we heard loud and clear is the feedback that we didn't have this form in any African language. So we have it translated now into Somali. So it's available in Chinese Simplified, Chinese Traditional, English, Russian, Somali, Spanish, and Vietnamese. And we'll make sure that we send out copies of all those different document versions in the minutes. So it's not available in more languages than that, just as an easy downloadable form. If you have a community that you feel really needs this form in a different language readily, please let us know. We do translation requests and accommodations, but usually we translate a standard form to have on what we call our forms database based on the volume. So if you have seen a peak of a different language need in your community, please let us know so that we can explore getting this form translated into additional standard languages. So requirements on the form, we need to know what caused the food to be destroyed, when it was destroyed, the cost. So basically the cost that the individual is asking for the replacement. We usually ask for a general description. So one thing that I found in January is that when people are in deep trauma, they have a really hard time thinking of all the food items that were destroyed. So we really thought about that form, and we're in the process of exploring different versions and looking at what other states have. And so one flexibility that we definitely have decided in the SNAP program is if people say things like frozen goods or frozen desserts or frozen breakfast, that's something that we considered as distributed food items. We didn't require someone to list out Eggo waffles and toaster strudels and I'm not a breakfast person, Pop Tarts, or, those aren't probably frozen, but just to list the different items. And also, we have to make sure that what's being claimed, it makes sense that it was in that location. So if someone is saying that the cause of the food destruction was, for example, a power outage, and they're asking for canned goods to be replaced, we need to look at that to make sure that we were issuing an appropriate replacement, just in case that case was reviewed to make sure that the replacement is above board. For the proof of loss or misfortune, that was something that we definitely look into in a different way. When there is a community that is impacted, we can look at what's happening in community-wide events. So for example, this winter we had the Lane County area where I live in. It was very well known nationally that we were experiencing a winter storm. And so in that situation, we did not need to have proof that that individual lost their power, because it was more likely than not. I believe at some points we had above 70% of the county without power, that the individual's claim was true. Where we come into needing more of the proof of loss or misfortune is, like I said with the rat example earlier, this form and this replacement ability goes beyond mass events. It goes beyond flooding, it goes beyond fires. It can be a one-off event. It can be that I purchased groceries with my SNAP benefits and I was on my way home and I was hit by a car. And so my car was towed. I left my groceries in the car and wasn't thinking about getting them out. And so I lost all of those groceries. So for those kinds of situations where it's not a community experienced event, then we do have to get that proof of that specific event happening. There is a limit. So this is another federal requirement. It's limited to the lesser of either the cost of the food lost or this individual's monthly SNAP allotment. And then once we have approved that request, we are required to issue those benefits back to the person by 10 days. So these are additional resources for when people experience food loss, because as we know, and as you all know, often the value of food purchased with SNAP over a number of months, perhaps what's in someone's pantry and what's in someone's fridge and freezer, is often above what one monthly allotment might be, especially in a total loss of a fire. So when what we can replace based on federal regulation goes well above what was lost, we definitely make sure to share these additional food resources to help people get closer to a total restoration of what they've lost. So this is contact info. I'll make sure that Misha includes it in the minutes. But I do want to share, like I said, we are really eager to hear the feedback of what the experience was with your communities during the last experience. I know that with fires, it's a bit different. I'm reading a question. Are folks eligible if they lost food because the refrigerator died? If so, how would they provide documentation? That's a great question. So it could be the purchase of a new refrigerator, possibly. Sometimes people have to pay to have a refrigerator brought to the dump, or perhaps they connected with their landlord if their landlord um, if the landlord is responsible for providing that refrigerator. So when we have situations like that, we train our staff to really talk the people through different ideas of how to verify so that they're not placed in a tricky situation. And if they are not able to come up with proof of the loss from, let's say, maybe an insurance company or some other kind of claim, then we also allow people to do a third-party verification. So it's someone that's signing that they attest that what the person is reporting is accurate. So we work in a lot of different ways to get that verified. That's a great question. Like I said, in January when I was helping out, I realized that what might seem very simple to fill out, a list of items and the cost of the items when people are not in trauma, it became very evident that it was really hard to come up with that. So that was something I experienced and something that we heard from our community partners loud and clear. And as we are moving towards redesigning that form, I am curious if there is other feedback that any of the community partners heard about the difficulty with completing the form. I will share a second is that the form currently is not in a format where individuals can docu-sign. And our team is currently trying to pursue and look at any kind of technology advancements that we can do for forms similar to the SNAP replacement form that allows someone to download it or open it up, fill it out, sign it, and submit it, because we're in a new digital world. So we're trying to really accommodate that as much as possible so that getting that signature is not such a hardship. So I would just like to open the floor. Are there any other suggestions or thoughts in regards to the process of requesting SNAP replacements or the form or anything else that you heard back?
Yeah, I do have a question actually. Since the one system for applying and renewing for SNAP benefits in the first place does allow digital signing to complete the application, is there some barrier to that being possible for the replacement form as well, to just be that same kind of function as how people sign when they apply or renew SNAP?
That is a great question. We would love for requesting SNAP replacement to be something someone can just do through logging into the one system, but that requires a programming ask. And right now we've got so many programs in the one system and so many different programming changing needs that they're all prioritized in different areas or different orders based on cost and how many hours it would take to change. So we believe that getting that moved forward will take a little bit. We are pursuing that, but we think that other options will be made possible sooner, I will say. But that's a great question.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see there's a comment, the form itself is not required as long as all the required components are listed on a piece of paper. Yes, but the attestation is very important. And most often when someone is writing out a list of what they've lost and they sign it at the bottom, that's not going to have the federally required attestation. Something like, I understand that I will be subject to penalties if I misrepresent the facts included, not limited to a charge of perjury for a false claim. It is rare to never that we're going to see that someone voluntarily on their own writes that before their signature. And so, yes, someone can submit a form with everything written, but we are still going to need an attestation signature on, like, connected to that. So most likely what we see, or usually what we see, is that that form that someone might independently write, that's going to count as a report, but not as a signed attestation. That's required within 10 days. Great question. I will say a couple of the things that we have tried to make clear is that this is for food that is destroyed or spoiled. So sometimes we've seen requests for replacement benefits when someone has placed their groceries on the porch and then someone stole it off their porch. The food is not destroyed in that situation. It's a theft of physical food. And so that is not covered under what's in the in the federal regulations. So, because that is a stolen, and we do have a replacement option for benefits that are stolen electronically. But since that kind of a misfortune is stuck right in the middle of the food wasn't destroyed and the benefits electronically weren't stolen, that's not a replacement that we are allowed under federal regulation at this time either. Don't see anything else in chat. Okay, well, we hope to come back with a proposed form or a sample of what we're looking at moving forward once we have that. I don't believe it will be in place before the fire season, unless hopefully the fire season does not start until very late, if not at all this summer. But we will bring that so that you all can see what we're looking at for replacement, and then we will move forward to getting those language translations. And so that is a huge ask, that if there are languages that are missing from that section as we're looking at designing this new form, it would be great if you let us know if you think we really need to have an additional language that is one of our standard translations, so we can move into that next step with all the languages thoroughly considered. So that's all I had today.
All right, thank you, Mayora. Did you have an update, or can you give an update on the Farm Bill? Or was there a different member of the team who was going to do that?
If someone else wants to give it, they can. What I will say is that we've been kept updated with AFSPA. We have submitted, we were asked to provide the 3 different priorities for Oregon. And I believe our 3 priorities, if my off-the-cuff memory serves me correctly, is to increase security for EBT benefits so that individuals that had benefits could have those benefits protected in a better way. The second that we chose is to make sure that the Thrifty Food Plan is changed according to what the cost of living is. There was something on the table to make the Thrifty Food Plan, which, for those who don't know, that's what we call the SNAP allotment. So the top SNAP allotment that is allowed for each group, there was a proposal that it not be allowed to increase unless that increase was going to be cost neutral. And that's pretty much impossible. So what it would do is freeze the Thrifty Food Plan allotments where they're at, even if the cost of living continues to go up. So making sure that the Thrifty Food Plan amount stays connected to cost of living, that was our second one. And I might have to put the third one in the chat. I'm forgetting what our third one was, but there were a lot of great things. I know one thing that's on the table is to remove the option for states to disqualify an individual who has had a felony conviction from food benefits. As many of us know, statistically, certain groups of people are over-policed, over-arrested, over-convicted, and over-felonized. And so sometimes what it does is it creates a huge food inequity between SNAP access in certain populations. And so I believe there is currently only one state that does fully disqualify an individual if they have a felony, and I believe that is South Carolina. And then the rest of the states do either a blended option or don't enact that provision at all. So Oregon is one of the many states, the states in the majority who do not disqualify individuals based on a felony from SNAP, but there are a number of other states who do some kind of a partial disqualification or required drug testing, things like that. And it's specifically a drug-related felony. I should share that. So that's another thing that's on the table, but there are some very, very interesting things, and we are tracking it very closely. SNAP team, is there anything additional that you would like to share? Okay, hearing nothing.
Mayor, did you see the
Yeah, Angelita,
question?
I see your question. I will look. I'm not familiar with the recriminations, House Bill 4002, so I will pull that up, or recriminalization.
All right, thank you. Well, we are at time. So thank you all for being here. I hope you found today's meeting very informative for you, and feel free to reach out and ask questions if they come to you later. We do have just a kind of a brief update. It'll be included in the follow-up with regards to summer EBT. What I would say is check out the website because it's been updated, and there's a way that you can sign up for receiving information on SEBT. And so I would encourage you to sign up if you'd like to be kept in the know, because they have a special email list for that if you sign up for it on their website. So I'll make sure that's in the follow-up for you as well. But have a great day, everyone, and we'll see you next month.